Hey, Dr. Barakat, how are you?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for making time. So today I wanted to talk about I think, an aspect which you and I spent a bunch of time talking about. I know you're really excited about some of the future technologies coming out from AI and related technologies. So let's get started, right? So first off, tell me a bit about yourself and and your introduction to how you got into research, how you got into ophthalmology. I'd love to hear a little bit more of your background.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, sure. No, thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm founder director of Retina Macula Institute of Arizona here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Retina specifically have been doing research for the better part of probably 10, 15 years at this point. Clinical trials are very interesting to me. They're kind of stimulating, fascinating. It's a nice way of not making the same widget over and over and over and over, and it gives us access and my patients access to newer cutting edge therapies, and which kind of dovetails nicely into this conversation because it's all about getting access to cutting edge technology, cutting edge therapies, and here we are. So yeah.
Great. And just briefly, right? I know you mentioned that you have some background in computer science, which is kind of unique when we first spoke. But tell us more about that. Just from the background.
I mean, so yes, absolutely. I come from a line of math people. My dad is an engineer. His father was a PhD in mathematics. So I'm the kind of person that unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, thinks in numbers. And so yes, computer science major in college. I found it fascinating. But at the same time, found that I enjoy interacting with patients as well. So I kind of found my way into medicine, but never kind of looked at you never kind of lose that outlook, that way of thinking about problem solving, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's fascinating. That makes us two people coming from computer sciences into healthcare, but obviously you took the tough route. So, no, great. I'm really excited to hear about your thoughts on what's happening today, right, and where we are with AI. So maybe to start off, right, tell us more about where do you see AI's role in generally maybe like applicable to the ophthalmology and the clinical trial space, and then would love to hear more about your particular practice and yourself, right?
No, no, sure. So I mentioned the reason why I like and why I actually love doing research. What I don't mention is all the other stuff that comes with it, right? So there's a high burden that comes with obviously regulatory burden, oversight in terms of data entry, you name it. I mean, there are many, many different steps along the way to assure of the quality of the data that goes in, and it's that's critical. But it also takes a lot of man hours and frankly repetitive tasks. So that's the sort of the underpinnings of getting to do all the fun stuff, all the cool stuff of bringing new therapies to patients. And so I think that is where there's a unique potential and possibility for artificial intelligence, right? Because artificial intelligence, as you know better than I do, um, helps to um, offset some of that burden, but also helps to uh, basically collaborates with whoever's using it. It makes it easier to do, makes it more complete, makes it more reliable, more accurate. Has the potential to sort of revolutionize the underpinnings of research. So there's a lot of pain points here that can be addressed by AI.
And what do you say when people say, "Hey, research has been one of the slower parts of the industry, which in terms of technology adoption, right?" I think there's even pre-AI, there's been other technologies which have kind of come in. Do you see anything different in terms of what's happening right now, or do you have a different view on what's maybe about to happen?
Well, I haven't thought about that, but since you bring it up, I would say it makes sense that in research there's going to be a slower adoption curve. Um, Only because it's not just the head of clinic saying, well, I want to try a different software or something like that. There's many, many different stakeholders here, right? So there's the clinical trial site, there's the investigator, there's the coordinator team, there's the central research organization, there's the sponsor themselves, and of course everything has to be audit ready if and when the FDA or the sponsor wants to look at all this stuff. So there's many different barriers, I guess you'd call it. But at the same time, there's for that very reason, there's a lot of opportunity because if you have to please that many stakeholders,
Mhm.
that's kind of tough. That's kind of tough.
Yeah.
And so I think that is an opportunity.
And do you think that these sort of barriers have, in some ways curtailed the amount of research we could do? Do you see that at all in practice?
No, I think so. I think so. I mean, you can do anything in a haphazard and manner, but if you want to do something um, in a reliable and consistent manner, that's it. It takes a lot of time, a lot of man hours, and a lot of effort. And of course, you're limited by that, right? So if I have the staff to run 5 trials, by definition, I don't have time to run the sixth. And it may not be the amount of time it takes to actually see the subjects or the patients within those trials. It may also be all the back end stuff that needs to happen, right? So for every single visit you have hours upon hours of data entry and query resolution and paperwork, and that's the stuff that is a limiting factor in terms of well how many subjects within a trial or for that matter how many trials you can accept at the site.
Hmm. Hmm. And have there been like historically challenges around managing this, status quo, right? Like one area I'm thinking about is what you just said, which is how do you enable the staff to do all this work in some kind of a scalable way? And do you have any like insights around how that worked or how that worked out for you or places in the past?
It's, I mean, honestly, if you talk to other clinical trialists, that is one of the biggest problems that we have is finding and training good and great staff and then keeping them because there's a bottleneck there. There's only so as you know in any field we talked about computer science, we talked about medicine. In any field you're limited by the number of good people that you have, and I think that will always be the case, right? And
Hmm.
so really what you have here is kind of like a force multiplier with AI. So you have good people. You want to keep training good people. I'm not suggesting in the least that you want to replace good people, but you want to
Yeah.
enable them to do what they're doing well at a faster, more reliable manner.
Yeah, and that kind of comes back to I think something which gets a lot of soundbite lately, which is what is AI's place in society? And I don't know where you sit, but I'm more excited about the abundance which is coming. I think there is like you said, it's a force multiplier for all the things we would want to do and couldn't do for all this while, right? And there's so many opportunities to do better research, more drugs to market. Like I think there's definitely an area where I could definitely see the world turning towards a place where there's just a lot more opportunity than there is today, and we're able to manage that kind of opportunity. And today we're bottlenecked because of many other resources or whatever it might be, right? So it's interesting that you mentioned there's an aspect of training and then there's an aspect of retention. Why did you say that? I'm curious. You sort of brought up the retention and keeping them around. And is there a reason why that's sort of a top of mind, I guess?
Yeah. Quite simply, knowing how to work within the confines of a clinical trial is a very specific skill set that's in high demand, right? So there are only so many people that are well trained and are able to do that, and these people are being courted as they should be, are being courted by clinical sites. They're also being courted by CROs, possibly even by sponsors, and so they're in high demand, right? And so um, you constantly have to try to replenish that pipeline as best as you can. But I don't have to tell you, turnover is a killer. So much better to maintain the staff that you have and enable them to be productive in the least amount of stressed environment as possible. And sometimes anything can get hectic, right? And so you're trying to figure out, staff burnout's another thing. For example, we're seeing more and more trials coming out, which is Hey, that's fantastic. That's why we're doing it, right? We're getting these cool new mechanisms of actions, and by the same time, the burden has begun to increase.
Right. You're talking about burden on the staff, on your staff.
Burden on, well, on the system as a whole, as a system as a whole, right? A burden on the staff, but also sponsors are looking for more sites. There's more concurrent trials going on right now. So
Mhm.
it's the entire system is trying to accommodate a higher demand than it appears was in the past, which is great. That means there's a lot of innovation in this field, which is fascinating. How do we accommodate that innovation, and how do we make sure that we don't limit innovation should be limited only by your imagination, not by the logistics on the ground.
Makes sense. Yeah. So that comes to one other point is how did you end up saying, yes, we're in research. Yes, I have to be mindful of the technology I'm bringing in, but let's sort of try out something in the AI space. You obviously are sort of an innovator yourself, but I'm curious, like how you think about adopting new technology, even potentially, like why work with companies like ourselves in the space, right?
Well, I mean, ultimately, we'll come back to where we are right now, but I mean, ultimately, it's either you adapt and you adopt, or you get left behind. And I think the writing is on the wall. AI already in other fields, even in day-to-day areas, AI has already made huge inroads in facilitating what we do on a daily basis. So I cannot imagine that this little niche of clinical trial research is immune to that sort of thing, right? And then, I mean, frankly, going back to this particular case, as I mentioned, there's many things that I love about clinical trials. There's many, otherwise, why would you bother doing it? There's also many things that are quite painful. There are pain points. Now, I'm very lucky. I have dedicated staff, and they're amazing, and I wouldn't be able to do what I do without them. But I also know that what they're doing is not very efficient. I mean, you have primary source, and you have to document that, and then from the primary source, you have to put in electronic data capture, and then afterwards, you get 15,000 queries, and you have to resolve those. It's um, we all know the principle of touch it once. This is touch it 15 times before any one particular data point is finally accepted. And if there is a possibility of reducing that, why wouldn't I try it? Now, granted, it'll be there'll be learnings along the way, so there'll probably be some bumps in the road, but I'm not afraid of a few bumps in the road if I can be one of the first people to actually learn how to introduce that into clinical trials.
Right. And what was staff reaction like? I'm curious because you're obviously bringing something which is new and um, it's something people may or may not be okay with in terms of like a change, right? So how do you handle that, and how do you handle that?
I mean, it's a learning curve, right? So, you have a conversation with a team saying, initially it may seem to you like it's more work, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to lay the foundation for something. But basically, we all need to get on board with here's the reason. I mean, do you love spending this much time sitting in front of your screen doing manual data entry, whereas you could be following up with patients, or maybe setting up another screen, or doing something that's actually, in essence, I feel like more productive, or shall I say, a more valuable use of your time. And
Mhm.
so, as long as you sort of lay out the vision, I think we can all be on the same team.
Makes sense. And in terms of just coming back to the type of AI or the type of technology we're like looking at, right? So I've sort of thought about it as there are certain types of problems you can solve today with AI, and it's fairly high accuracy, high consistency. And then there's some which are, I would say, much higher value, but it might be a little bit further away because you might need more validation, you might need regulatory approvals, things like that. So, are you seeing things in the similar review, and what would some of these examples be if I were to ask you specifically in the ophthalmology space?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You have to learn how to walk before you can run. And so right now you look for the low-hanging fruit. You look for things that are more actionable. So some of the things that I mentioned right now, right? So the filling out the forms, the 1572s, a killer is informed consent. The informed consents, they go through several iterations throughout the trial, and even though the subject may already be in the trial for months, all of a sudden they need to be reconsented, and it's it's not rocket science, but you need to keep track of which form it is, because otherwise there's a deviation, and the less deviations there are, the better trial we conduct, and hopefully the cleaner our data is. So there's uh, DOA logs, for example, all those things. It basically boils down to there's many actionable things that AI can help us with, that are the important but still minutia of the day-to-day aspects of the clinical trial. The other thing is, um, I cannot tell you how many times I've run back to find those little folders they have that print the protocol in fine font that you need a magnifier to even be able to see, because, well, what's the inclusion exclusion again, or what's the exact rescue treatment criteria. And hey, listen, it works. Is it efficient though? No, of course it's not efficient. So all those things, I think, would be squarely within the bailiwick of something that we can do now. I think that's something that AI can address now and make things run more smoothly. So rather than me, you know, hitting the pause button saying, I don't know if I'm supposed to treat you or not, and then running to look at the form, or frankly, picking up the phone and calling the CRO, or calling the sponsor, this is something that can be answered now. Now, you're absolutely right. I mean, the sky's the limit. So, would it be great to have AI, you know, search and find patients for me, or be part of the discussion about informed consent, or all those things that we may have thought was science fiction just a couple decades ago. I think they're feasible, but this is harder to do. So let's
Mhm.
for the time being show the concept works. Let's see AI is a safe partner in the clinical trial space. And then once you've established that, I think you can slowly expand the functionality and usefulness.
So it's interesting how you stratified it, right? There's a certain set of tasks and workflows which are, I would say, not entirely patient facing in how you described it. It could be preparing your documentation, basically managing your regulatory overhead. Finance is another one we see quite often, right? We're
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
just managing all the invoice flows, all the billing. Like, there's a certain amount of like overhead there which requires a lot of time to do well. And then, of course, all the manual chores like data entry and double data capture, things like that. Um, I certainly think there is a taller ask in terms of putting an AI in front of a patient and having it interact with the patient. I think that we're entering a very different territory if we go there. But somewhere in
But
between,
wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be
I don't know,
awesome?
is it? I'd love
Yeah,
to know your.
again, that's thinking way ahead. But I mean, you're right. But right now, you focus on the tasks that I would love to outsource if I could, but I can't, right? And then slowly, incrementally increase.
That's right, yeah. And what about like things where, because especially Retina tends to be very image heavy in terms of just the modalities involved. I think there's some exciting areas where AI can take us potentially. I'm just curious, like, have you seen anything interesting, anything you're excited about, and
Oh, for sure.
where are we in
Yeah.
terms of timeline to be actually like adopting these things?
I mean, no, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to that, when it looks to biomarkers on OCTs, for example, they've done some really good work on AI, segmenting like subretinal fluid versus intraretinal fluid, or the presence or absence thereof. It's already being used in some trials, notably with nodal vision. Nodal vision, they have their own way of segmenting as well, and this is what I used in the Truckee trial, for example, following patients that are used faricimab in the real world. I know there's many other imaging centers across the country that are looking at this also with their own proprietary artificial intelligence modules. And yeah, I mean, this again, the sky's the limit. I'm sure as we speak, multiple labs, multiple teams are looking at the use of AI in, for example, measuring geographic atrophy or predicting the progression thereof. And that's something that's really useful because we, as a field, we can tell you the averages and we can tell you certain risk factors for progression, but when you see that one patient, that one subject in front of you, do you really know what the rate is going to be? No. That's why many times you see them back, and even in some of these trials, and you look for the progression. It sure would be nice if you had greater confidence, like an AI module telling you, well, this was most likely the rate of progression, and these are the patients that are most likely to benefit from treatment versus not. So yes, I mean, we're definitely knocking on that door. It is very imaging heavy, and so yeah.
Got it. And are you seeing this in clinic as well? I mean, I know we spoke about in the clinical trial context, but have you adopted or have you like started to see practitioners bring this into your regular, standard of care practice?
I haven't seen too much of it in the clinic yet, at least AI in terms of imaging, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was slowly becoming introduced, right? So, I mean, for that matter, it is being introduced again with the recent FDA approval of the home OCT device. That home OCT device, you cannot separate that from the AI module that's running in the background. So I guess I'm behind the times when I say no, I haven't seen it in the clinic. It will be in the clinic.
Okay, so it's making inroads. You think that'll happen? I guess it's happening right now in some
It, it,
cases.
it is it is it is happening as we speak.
Interesting. Great. So in terms of like just fast forwarding this, right? Specifically talking about clinical trials, one area which I find myself, you know, thinking quite a bit is when we speak to sponsors. I mean, you're on the clinician, you're on the trialist side, but speaking to sponsors, some of the common things they talk about is, hey, I have a tough time staying on track with my program. I can't find enough sites who are able to recruit, able to do the work. And it always seems very similar. Like all the problems seem very similar in terms of like how they describe these the challenges with the trials. Um, do you think that changes at some point? Where could this go and how could this change?
Some of it will never change. If sponsors saying, "Boy, I wish we had more sites or more activity or faster recruitment," I don't think will ever change. A clinical trialist saying, "Boy, I wish my staff had more or less turnover." That some of that will never change, right? But I think when it comes to this in particular. What AI is uniquely positioned to do is help level the playing field. So trying to put on my sponsor hat right now, and you've never been one, so I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I would assume that you have, let's say, 100 sites for a trial. Of those 100 sites, I would say maybe 50 of them are really active. The other 50 may not be. So that's number one. Can AI help those other 50 sites be more productive? Well, the question is, why are they not productive? Is it something that is manageable? Is it something that they're spending so much time on these other tasks that AI could take care of them? Who knows, right? That's one of the pain points. Then the other question is, of those sites that are active, what's the quality data that you're getting? Because I can tell you this right now, it is going to be a wide range. You'll get some sites that are very proficient, and you get some sites that provide high quality data, and sometimes those two come in combinations, and sometimes they don't. And so I would say it would behoove me as a sponsor to know throughout the trial that we're doing these quality assessments and quality assurances rather than at the tail end when, let's say, some of these patients at these sites have already finished and, well, what happened here? Where's the documentation? Or these things are missing or that's missing, right? So I think to answer your question, there will, if you ever hear a sponsor or a clinical trialist tell you that something's perfect, they're not looking hard enough. There will always be some issue that needs solving, but I think some of those are solvable.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point about sort of discrete versus continuous management, right, of your site quality or data. Um, I do see the argument for you have to do maybe like more frequent checks on what's happening in terms of your data coming in. But then right now that also directly correlates to the cost you have to invest into the trial. So you've got to make a balanced choice, I suppose, and I think that's one of the challenges for many organizations, right? And especially if you're in some form of a scaled mode with lots of sites, lots of patients, then it becomes even more challenging. So these are like
Correct.
practical issues, I think, where I can see the scale which AI brings in could be another accelerant in terms of like what you can do in more real time than where we are today, right? So that's another exciting part of it. Great. Thanks for your time, Dr. Barakat. It's been exciting to talk to you about where you see AI and where you're adopting AI in your clinic and where things are going. So excited to
Yeah,
see.
it's
And
been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
yeah,
Exciting to see
absolutely.
where this takes us.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a good one then. Thanks.